Many famous people put their careers on pause to serve their country when World War II was declared. Sadly, not all of them survived.
It's really war. People are going to kill each other and be killed.
Carole Lombard is one of those names you know today and know she was an actress, but the scope of her career is obviously forgotten. She starred in 78 films and was known for her exceptional comedic abilities. Today, she's most famous for her marriage to megastar Clark Gable. By 1940, Lombard was the highest-paid actress in Hollywood. When he asked Congress to declare war after Japan's attack on Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, Lombard immediately volunteered to help. Within weeks, she was headlining the first war bond sales event in Indianapolis. Her presence helped make it a huge success, drawing 12,000 people out to financially contribute to the war effort. The original plan was that she would take a 3-day train ride home to Hollywood, but Lombard suspected Gable was having an affair and wanted to get back, so she got on a plane instead. Tragically, the plane crashed into a mountain in Nevada, killing everyone on board. The obituary in Variety read, "Carole Lombard died in the line of duty. She was the first casualty of show business in this world war. She was in active service on a mission in defense of the United States, selling defense bonds, when death suddenly overtook her in the skies." Leslie Howard will be forever defined by one particular role, Ashley Wilkes in the epic Gone with the Wind.
Isn't it enough that you've gathered every other man's heart today? You've always had mine. You've got your teeth on it.
Born in London in 1893, Howard fought in World War I and experienced post-traumatic stress disorder, back then known as shell shock, from his time in combat. Despite this, and the fact that he was in his mid-40s when Britain entered World War II, he returned to the UK to join the conflict. His role involved making propaganda shorts and radio broadcasts, as well as traveling internationally to give talks and strengthening the relationships between Britain and various other countries. There are rumors, however, that his role had more to do with covert operations and simple diplomacy. On June 1, 1943, Howard boarded a civilian airplane in London headed for Lisbon. It's worth pointing out that Portugal was neutral during the war, and the daily flight between the two cities had continued throughout the war, and to date, the Luftwaffe had left the planes alone. 2 weeks earlier, they fired at the exact flight Howard was now on. That time, the flight landed safely. This time, those on board weren't so lucky. It was the first time the Luftwaffe had shot down a passenger plane during the war, possibly because their spies confused the rotund cigar-smoking man Howard was with for Winston Churchill. Allegedly, the Prime Minister himself believed this was why the plane was shot down.
Okay, let's hit it, boys.
Glenn Miller had people on their feet and dancing all through the 30s and into the 40s with his band Glenn Miller and his orchestra. He had 23 #1 hits, including In the Mood and Chattanooga Choo Choo, but after the attack on Pearl Harbor, Miller signed up with the U.S. Army. Since he was already in his late 30s, he wasn't assigned a combat role. Instead, the military made him an Army band leader, sending him all over the world to entertain the troops and boost morale. On December 15, 1944, Miller boarded a plane in England that was headed to France, where he was scheduled to perform for the troops that had recently liberated Paris. But the plane never arrived at its destination. It vanished in the fog over the English Channel. Over the years, there have been many theories floated about what happened, including that Miller was a spy on a secret mission to end the war, or even that the plane was accidentally shot down by the UK's Royal Air Force. We may never know the truth about Glenn Miller's disappearance, but recently discovered evidence suggests that the plane was flying low due to the fog, and as a result, the engines iced up, causing it to crash into the English Channel. Bobby Wheezer Hutchins found fame as a child actor. From 1927 to 1933, he appeared in 70 shorts, including Hal Roach's classic Our Gang series, later known as The Little Rascals.
Daddy loves Little Wheezer.
And you aren't mad at Petey, are you, Daddy?
I know.
Hutchins' acting career was over by 1933, so by the time the U.S. entered World War II, he'd long been out of the business. When he finished high school, Hutchins joined up. He spent 20 months training to become a pilot in California and was set to graduate with his wings on May 20, 1945. But on May 17th, Hutchins went up in a plane to get the final 30 minutes of flight time needed to complete his training. It was around 8:20 p.m. when he brought the plane in for a landing. A report said he was coming in low when he realized another plane was also attempting to land on the airstrip. He adjusted his flight path, but tragically this led to the two aircraft colliding. While the other plane landed with only minor damage, Hutchins' plane crashed and he was killed. He was 20 years old. Ernie Pyle was in his 40s when the U.S. entered World War II. Born in 1900, he signed up to fight in World War I just a month before it ended, so he never saw combat. Pyle made his name as a journalist who'd travel around the world and interview regular, seemingly unimportant people to get their perspective on world events. He continued this theme in his war reporting, traveling alongside the troops everywhere from Europe to Africa to the Pacific Theater. During this period, he interviewed average enlisted men about the war and their experiences. His articles were huge hits with the public, and he won the 1944 Pulitzer Prize for his work. Perhaps more importantly, he won the respect of the soldiers. Pyle was one of the few journalists who knew firsthand what it was like taking part in D-Day because he was alongside the troops as they landed. But on April 18, 1945, during the Battle of Okinawa, Pyle was shot by a Japanese machine gun blast and died instantly. He was posthumously awarded the Purple Heart. Eric Knight was a best-selling author and screenwriter in the 1930s, but he's now most well known for his classic book, Lassie Come Home. Born in England in 1897, Knight had a tough childhood and immigrated to the US as a teenager. When World War I broke out, he traveled north to enlist in the Canadian military. Knight and his two brothers all served in France, but he was the only one who came home alive. After his military service ended in 1926, Knight embarked on a writing career. But with the outbreak of World War II, he returned to England and volunteered for the British Ministry of Information. This meant working on propaganda films and giving radio broadcasts. When the US joined the war effort after Pearl Harbor, Knight returned home and enlisted in the military, where he was assigned to the Special Services Division. Meanwhile, he also wrote This Above All, a hit novel set during the Battle of Britain that went on to become a feature film. As part of his military duties, Knight was sent to Africa on a temporary assignment. Tragically, he died on January 15, 1943, when the transport plane he was on crashed. To this day, there are some who believe that the plane was shot down by the Germans because they confused it for the one that President Franklin Roosevelt was taking to the Casablanca Conference. No athlete came out of the 1936 Berlin Olympics more famous than Jesse Owens. He won 4 gold medals at the Games, and one of those medals was for the 400-meter relay, where he and his teammates set a world record. One of those runners was Foy Draper. After the Games, he returned home to California, and when the US entered World War II, he joined the Army Air Forces as a pilot. By the beginning of 1943, Draper was stationed in Tunisia, North Africa. On January 4th, he took off in his bomber with 2 other men on board. They were headed into what would become known as the Battle of Kasserine Pass. The plane never made it there. In fact, it was never seen again. Draper and the 2 other men were presumed killed after the aircraft went missing. It's not known for sure how, why, or even when they died, although Draper's date of death is often given as February 1, 1943. He was posthumously awarded a Purple Heart. Hélène Leune had been a war correspondent for major European media outlets for 4 decades by the time World War II rolled around. Originally from Greece, she went to Paris for university and married a Frenchman. In 1913, she returned to Greece to cover the Balkan Wars for the French press. She also became a nurse and offered her services to the Red Cross. In 1915, Leune published a memoir about her experience as a Red Cross nurse and as a German prisoner of war for 5 months, although the book was considered more propaganda than rigorous journalism. During the 1920s, she continued her journalism career and gave talks about her experiences. When France declared war on Germany in 1939, Leune was working on a hospital train within days. She died on a bombing raid on Vitry-le-François on May 18, 1940. Nikolaos Hatzidakis was a renowned mathematician. He was educated in Greece before going to France for graduate school, where he focused on differential geometry. But when the Greek population of Crete rose up in rebellion against their Ottoman occupiers in 1896, Hatzidakis paused his studies to join the fighting. 1 year later, the Ottomans crushed the uprising. When World War II began, Hatzidakis was mostly retired and living comfortably in Greece. That all changed when Germany and Italy occupied the country in 1941. Despite speaking the languages of the occupiers, he refused to collaborate with or even interact with them. When famine exacerbated a food shortage in the country, Hatzidakis was one of the thousands of Greeks who starved to death. He died on January 25, 1942, aged 69. The 1928 Olympics in Amsterdam were the first time women competed in gymnastics, and the hometown Dutch women's team dominated, easily winning the gold medal. Of the 12 members, 5 were Jewish, along with their male coach, but their gold medals didn't protect them once the Nazis occupied the Netherlands. Jewish athletes were banned from sports clubs, and many of the Olympic team were arrested and sent to their deaths. Gymnast Estela Extarreba was killed along with her 2 young children on September 17, 1943, as soon as they arrived at Auschwitz. That same year, her teammates and coach were killed in the Sobibor concentration camp. Judicia Taman Simons on March 20th, Helena Nordheim and coach Gerrit Clara Koper on July 2nd, and Anna Dresden Pollack on July 23rd. All of them arrived at the camp with their families, and their children were killed along with them. In most cases, their spouses died as well. The only Jewish member of the team to survive the war was Elka de Levi. She died in 1979.